Greetings, everyone. I am sitting down to doodle another sort of Spider-Man related thing, and this one, of course, will be, as always, just a freehand, real-time, just for fun type thing. So let's zoom in on this a little bit too, and I'll see if I can lock it down in such a way that it doesn't get all weird and blurry, which is always a problem with me. Yeah, I'm going to start this one off a little bit differently by drawing the nose first, or at least some part of the nose. Just like that. Slight little tilt to it. So I hope you're having a good day. I hope you're doodling as well. I think it's fun to just pick up a pen and scratch around ideas, and it doesn't have to be super serious. You're not necessarily doing terrible things. You're just getting ideas out of your head. It's the way I like to look at freehand drawing anyway. So what I'm doing here is going back to Pizza Time with Peter Parker and trying to think of how I want his mask to roll up from his face and still have it be Spider-Man, but not necessarily. Yeah, we want this to just kind of be fun. Now it might be more kind of like my age thing, I suppose, of how I think of Spider-Man. And I think, the movies kind of hint towards that, but he starts off as somebody really in high school. Now, that would probably put him around like maybe 16 when he gets bit by a spider. I was trying to like map out where I want his face to be too. I do kind of treat him with a little bit of like that alien kind of head thing I might have mentioned in that last video. But he's kind of smart alecky, but he actually does care about a lot of people in his life. And I think the weight of that responsibility, it really does weigh on him. I'm kind of doing this in a way that, well, because I'm not doing any pre-pencil work, I'm trying to build his face, which is kind of a weird thing to do. But again, I kind of picture him more around that, like, the teenage version of him. Because it just seems kind of funny to have that much pressure. And that can be such a heavy thing to carry for anybody. Now, there are a lot of people in the world who have different sort of circumstances that they're growing up under. And for them, the pressures of Spider-Man, they're already living with that in some way, other than, not being bit by a radioactive spider that somehow doesn't turn malignant on them and gives them abilities. Just putting in like a little shadow ear here. Maybe a little crease. The mask isn't as tight there. But it's such a weird thing to think about, the responsibilities of others. So if you grew up around rural settings, you know that there are people out there who they get up early, they they have to look after farms, for example, so they have chores and things of that nature to kind of contend with. Responsibilities, I suppose. I'm semi-completing this as I go. And I'm not going to put lots and lots of time into this. The mask is such a weird thing for me to draw. That looks really... Oh well. It's kind of funny looking. Let's have that one curved just a little bit more that way. That seems funny. You know, he might have a couple of pimples, maybe some stubble, those little cheesy high school mustache things. Let's put a couple little sprigs of hair in there. I mean, he does probably try to shave once in a while because, you know, that's like a mature thing to do. But he's not always super mature. Now, how would we want him to eat the pizza? Would he take his gloves off? Yeah, I don't know. So let's draw a thumb here. I think for the most part you kind of would. You probably would take your gloves off, but if you're kind of busy, you may not. That seems like a pretty wide thumb. That's okay. We'll let Spider-Man do whatever Spider-Man needs to do. And I'll leave the gloves on just because it's funny. Now what I'm going to do now is try to figure out where his arm and shoulder would be, because they're going to be back here and it's going to be making its way. So let's say his shoulder comes to about here for how he's eating the slice. So it's we're going to curve in his arm almost like the length of what his upper arm would be, right down to his shoulder, shoulder to elbow. But then his forearm would take over the view that we'd have of that arm. Just a little bit. Now we're going to work in this slice. This is a big New York slice of pizza. So I'm going to do the crust here. like sort of like cheese blisters and dough blisters that occupy a little bit of the bake. Now, if you eat a New York slice, a way of controlling that slice is to fold it. But if it's a super thin crust, it's pretty hard to fold that thing. But anyway, that's the difficulty that we're dealing with. Now, pizza is such a strange food. And you get these little life lessons from pizza. There's people have favorites, of course, toppings wise. Some people are just all about the cheese and sauce. You get like a chicken Alfredo pizza kind of, or chicken and pesto, or the Hawaiian, which there's a lot of debate about Hawaiian pizza. I don't even know if people in Hawaii really would eat it that way, but I can't tell you what Peter Parker's favorite slice would be. I'm going to try to put like little squiggles of stuff in here that could be almost anything. Although pepperoni is probably the easiest to recognize, so that looks like a pizza a little bit, don't you think? Or enough like a pizza. Now I can finally finish off a little bit of this jaw. Under here I could probably put a little bit more of the costume. Now I don't know how practical certain things are in the construction of the costume. So you pull down the mask, is there kind of like felt on the outside of the bottom part of this that connects to Velcro underneath, that hook and loop like fabric connectors underneath there? I don't know. Oh, dip the pen. I don't know. Now, we're only about 15 minutes in. So as I said, we're going with kind of like, we're going to think that the shoulder is somewhere around there, right? We can see, obviously, this is where his chest is. We'll have the upper pectorals kind of connect there just a little bit. think that looks silly. But anyway, that's the fun of a sketchbook, don't you think? Doesn't have to be exact. Just the idea. So let's see. I don't have them with gigantic deltoid and lats. I think a lot of his strength is not based on his physicality anyway. Which is, I guess, part of the difference between him and Eddie Brock, the guy who ends up being Venom. I think Eddie was under the impression that he had to earn some of his strength as well because, well, I mean, he knew the secrets of Peter Parker from wearing the suit. So he knew that Peter Parker didn't necessarily earn all of his abilities. I was just doodling the abs there. But we're not going to go that much further, I don't think. So here on the chest, this is where I'm going to kind of work in the symbol. I'm taking just a slight amount more care than I did with the other little doodles. Not that much more because, well, I'm not feeling that pressed for time. This should have been tilted a little bit more, I think. It's all right. Now, let's see if we can drop in some lines a little bit. So again, I think it just kind of depends on what you expect out of the costume. Some people are, well, they have different thoughts on what they want the costume to look like. I'm not nearly as into the modern stuff, mainly because, you know, as a kid I wouldn't have drawn Tom Holland as Spider-Man, obviously. Let's put in some of these bits of webbing. So if at all possible, I think it's ideal to want to improve on whatever it is that you do artistically. And I think also it's not always good to be super picky about whatever it is that you're up to. I think it's fun to do things and doodle. I don't know if there's much point in suffering with not having fun while doing it. So that's sort of my goal with most of this. Oh, that's my buddy Neville in the background there, if you can hear him. He's just reminding me that we're a little bit more than 20 minutes, well, more than 21 minutes. Now, we'll just kind of do some of the smaller detailed things. I don't know if I'll bother adding any color to this. As I said, some of this should have been curved a little bit more. Let's do a little bit more on this. Now you have to imagine that trying to keep a secret identity that provides help to people has got to be such a weird thing, because, you know, for Spider-Man, if he catches bad guys, and it just so happens that those bad guys have a bunch of money on them, I mean, I wonder how often you would just look at them and think, well, I could do good with this money and just, you know, help out your Aunt May. You know, but maybe he thinks ill-gotten gains or something like that. Now, let's work on the slight details of the hand here. Make sure that we have some of the definition of the thumb in there. Remember, this is a bit of the forearm, that's a bit of the elbow, but it's just kind of hiding itself. Oh, just going to do the back part of the forearm. A little bit of the tricep, a little bit of the deltoid. A little bit of the... It's funny, you ever see the video of, I don't remember the name, a child anyway, who's talking about delicious foods, where it's like, you know, a little bit of spice and a hint of this, or anyway, it's a pretty funny little video. A little hint of saltiness. Some people are funny, man. Sorry if I sort of chuckle at stuff like that when it pops in my head. It's just, I can't help it sometimes. All right. I think we are just about there. I don't really want to do much more than the half hour anyway, just to sit down and draw something for about a half an hour. Is not that bad. Doesn't have to be so accurate that, you know, you have to put 40 hours into it. I think this is what you get for a half an hour, roughly. That's not so bad. Let me back this out just a little bit. Lock it down just enough. And a little bit of shading here. Just to darken it in, not so much shade. And over here I can say something like, before I even write something, I'm reminded of something, and I was probably hinting at this a little bit earlier with something a good friend of mine talked about in regards to pizza. That, you know, you have to be careful when you eat it, and that if it's too hot to touch, it's too hot to taste. Now, that's my good buddy Frankie said that. And that's one of those, it sounds so obvious, but you forget that kind of thing. It's like one of those truths in my everyday life that I think about. So thanks, Frank, for that. Because that's one of those things, yeah, really, I think about that as one of the greatest truths. Yeah, if it's too hot to touch, don't put it in your mouth. You're going to burn your mouth. Anyway, that's the wisdom of Frank. It's such a true thing, though. I don't know how often you get to eat pizza and it's just so hot and you burn your mouth, and you know you're like, you're going to be uncomfortable for a while because of that terrible choice that you make. That's so funny. It's up here, let's just say. Oh yeah. Just because I think it's funny to see it written down, we'll say, oh yeah, yummers. I don't know why I think that's funny. Oh, you can say this too, because I think this is also kind of funny, although I don't think it's really prevalent anymore. Do people still say this kind of thing? Nom nom. And a little bit of, let's say right here, we'll go, and we'll kind of scratch it in a little bit too. I don't know how often some of you eat pizza, and if you're like, oh, I would eat pizza every day. I don't know if I'd want to eat pizza every day, but there's so many different types of pizza, you can get away with it for a while. That is for sure. You get treats of pizzas. Uh-huh. We're not going too scrolly, but we are taking our precious time. let's do a little bit more ridiculousness. So technically, you'd hear lots of people say this, you don't need any more than one exclamation point. But for those of us who don't have to listen to everybody, use as many as you feel like in your sketchbook. If you want to use 5 exclamation points, that's up to you. You are not beholden to anyone's idea necessarily. Now, the last thing we're going to do, because we're now over 31 minutes, is I'm just going to add kind of like little texture, nonsense squiggly lines inside my drawing of letters. And I think all that really does is just take away from the obvious sort of little flaws. These are almost like little embellishments. So you don't look at the outside and go, oh, that looks like it was done freehand for sure. Instead, this looks like I had intention with whatever I did, because I'm spending time on those little flaws. And that's the way I look at sketchbooks. They don't have to be perfect. You just have to come up with something that says, well, yeah, well, this is what I wanted to do, is sit down and do something. And if you get something to fall out of your head that looks like whatever, that's fine. I'm just darkening the lines in some of the spots, mostly in the underside. This is really just for me. It helps add a little bit more character and depth of letter. Separate that a little bit too. Again, almost like I had certain intentions when I started to do this. Sometimes, and this is my own sort of take on things, sometimes I hear that there was an accident. And I'll be honest with you, I don't really think there's such thing as accidents. I think you can go about your life and say that it's possible that you have been at the wrong place and all that kind of stuff. I think, for me, how I can see when bad things happen, it's more about like a level of carelessness sometimes. And sometimes people don't mean for terrible things to happen. And when it does happen, and when they call it an accident, then I just wonder, well, yeah, you may not have meant for that to happen, but your carelessness might have led to that, or again, perhaps you were in the wrong place at the wrong time. That's a ridiculous thing to say, but I suppose it kind of comes down to will and something that's bigger than yourself. And if you think that there's something greater than yourself, then there wouldn't be an accident. Anyway, so there we are. We have 36 minutes of just kind of doodling my sketchbook, and that's Spider-Man. Just taking a moment to get some pizza. And I think that's it. I don't think I need to go any further than that. Thanks for hanging out for a minute or so, and perhaps we'll see you again at some time in the near future. All right. Ciao for now.